Now look, I don't ask you guys for very much on this channel. In fact, I don't think I ask very much at all. But what I need you to do is to stop comparing this to this. Hey, what's up, bookworms? Mike back today to talk a little, I guess you'd call it kind of comparison. Now, I want to say up front, guys, this is not going to be a versus video. I'm not going to be talking about this versus this. What we did recently over on Bibliotheory's channel is we talked about that in a kind of this versus this kind of way. Today, what I'm going to be talking about is kind of the response I get whenever I talk about one of these two series on the channel, be it in the comments, be it just in messages, be it just overall temperature that I feel like I get, the feedback that I get. It seems like these two get compared nonstop. And I won't lie, even I did that at first. You can go back and watch when I reviewed Empire of Silence back in 2019. I did make that comparison. What I said was, imagine if Red Rising was written by Christopher Ruocchio and ℓ𝕗 starts out as a goal. That was the way that I put it. And I think since then, it has just kind of become this way that every time I mention Red Rising, I got to hear someone talk about how great Sun Eater is as compared to Red Rising. And every time I mention Sun Eater, someone has to be like, oh, that series is boring. Red Rising is better. And I'm like, stop. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? They're very, very different, I feel like. And I think there is room for both of them. And that's what we're going to do today. We're going to kind of talk about the similarities. We're going to talk about how much different they are. And we're going to talk about some of those criticisms as well. And kind of, I guess you say, gauge which one's for you and kind of really just talk about how they are very different series. And I would really appreciate if people quit comparing these two, because outside of the love for Roman and Greek history, I'm not finding a lot there. Let's begin with that, guys. Let's talk about some of those similarities. Obviously, the love of Roman and Greek history. It's quite clear that Pierce Brown and Christopher Ruocchio probably took the same courses in college or they watched the same documentaries on History Channel or something. They have a lot of the same interests there as far as like our real world goes. I feel like some are very on the nose, some of them are a little bit more distant. But I think that's the first thing that comes up. Like I think Christopher even told me that someone got their series so mixed up that someone asked him what the AU between their names meant. And he was like, what are you talking about? So yeah, their lead characters are both going to kind of talk your ear off about Cicero and Plutarch if you give them a minute. And that's just kind of to be expected when you have an interest in those things, writing it into your story, into your protagonist a little bit. That's going to happen. But outside of that, I don't find a lot of similarity there. With mostly the first person narrative being in both of them, obviously Red Rising does kind of change that over the course of time. But perhaps the unreliable narrator, I think that would be kind of a similarity there. Both deal with the politics of, galactic houses and a galactic monarchy, the kind of the emperor of all things, the sovereign. I think you got similarities there. Both do a little bit of the planet hopping. They do the crew building, the galactic space battles. All those things are going to be in a real fun sci-fi adventure, I do believe. But both like to ask a lot of philosophical questions, show how war changes our heroes, shows maybe how war isn't quite as glamorous as it was kind of sold to them as young men, and they get out in the real world and they see what things are like. It's kind of like the old World War II, or I'm sorry, the Vietnam veterans. They heard from their grandpas and their dads about how great World War II was, and they got to Vietnam like, this isn't what I expected. So you might have some of those kind of similarities there. But again, both do ask a lot of philosophical questions about basically what is my purpose here. Maybe some characters that are similar are going to pop up in both. Outside of just Hadrian and ℓ𝕗, you're going to have some side characters that seem a little similar, seem like they were derived maybe from the same idea. I think you could do that in a lot of series, not just these. There are a lot of, I guess you would say some stereotypes or standards of science fiction characters. They're going to kind of leak into some of those. And I think that both these authors have no problems wearing their influences on their sleeve, and that kind of will bring up some of those things. And that brings me to, both of these are very much accused of being derivative of other stories. Like I said, I feel like they both do really wear their influence on their sleeve. And what I mean by that is you can look at Red Rising and say, hey, look, the first Hunger Games book kind of has a lot of similarities here. Now, this came up right after Hunger Games ended. Maybe Pierce might have thrown some of those things in to kind of capture that audience. Don't know if that was a publisher choice or a Pierce Brown choice. I did ask him that when I reviewed him on the channel, and basically mum's the word. He didn't want to say one way or the other, but I think it's pretty clear when you have the distinct change in direction of that series in book 2, whereas nothing like that. It makes a lot of sense that would be something that you do to get your book out, to get your series out there. Maybe the publisher stipulated, you need to do this because we want to capture that audience. Whereas Sun Eater gets a lot of comparisons to Dune, Name of the Wind, Dan Simmons, Hyperion, things like that. I know Christopher personally, so I know that these are a lot of things that are going to be influences of his. In fact, how Christopher and I first met was talking about Dune for about 30 emails back and forth before I ever read a word of his writings. Anytime he got a framing story, people were going to automatically go to Name of the Wind. Christopher's a very beautiful prose writer, like a Patrick Rothfuss, so I can see why people will come up with that comparison. But I think that would be kind of the similarities there. Some of the differences, and this is where I feel like the whole crux of this video lies, because those things, I feel like you can find a lot of similarities between two popular series, quite a bit. You can find a lot of things that are going to be the same. As far as the differences, and this is where I think makes these two books stand apart, let's begin with the pacing. Red Rising is pretty much a non-stop monster drink of adrenaline. It's just non-stop. He's found a way to make almost every page seem like non-stop action, even if it's just characters standing around talking to each other. It feels like there's always something popping off. Whereas you got Sun Eater, very much a slow burn, philosophical journey, kind of in that Robin Hobb realm of the Eldlings way, where you're spending time with this character, you're getting to know them inside and out, and the action sequences, you can count on one hand how many of them happen in each book. So very, very different in that regard. I think that's kind of the biggest one here where I'm like, I don't see why you guys are comparing these whatsoever. Red Rising is very much a space adventure, fun, kind of rooted in, not very much rooted, rather, in scientific accuracy. There are some things that the characters do that you're going to be like, would that work in real life? Most times you're going to probably say no. I think even Pierce Brown said at a convention that one time he went and met with people at NASA and they thought it was cute that he tried, Whereas Sun Eater does everything short of give you, the Fibonacci sequence of how space works. It pretty much gets into the math of everything. And I don't mean like in a just straight up like Alistair Reynolds level. I just mean like he's going to tell you how the sausage is made. He's going to explain things to you. You want to freestyle through space on a rocket? Hey, Pierce has got your back on that one. You want to learn about centrifugal force and time dilation. Christopher Ruocchio is there for you. He's going to give you those things that you're looking for. And that kind of leads me to the technology being very, very different with these two. And again, Red Rising will throw a ton of camel case at you about technical terms with no explanation. You're just supposed to understand that's normal in this world. It's like if you were from the 1950s and you're reading a book and they start mentioning an iPhone, not going to explain it to you. That's just the way that stuff is, and you should understand that. So he's not going to really explain that much to you. Where Sun Eater explains painstakingly everything that a high matter sword can and cannot cut through. It explains how this genetic sequence works with their aging. It will kind of get into the brass tacks of what makes these things what they are. So I think in this way, if this was fantasy, Red Rising would be the soft magic, whereas Sun Eater would be the hard magic in that regard when you're dealing with the technology. But both have very cool weapons. I mean, one is basically a lightsaber, which I've loved since I was a little kid, and the other one, have like a razor, which is just like the coolest weapon, maybe in all of sci-fi literature. I don't know. I love it so much. The protagonist, I don't think, could be more different, really. This is a big one here for me, because when you say that Darrow and Hadrian are just carbon copies of one another, I got to question if you've read the series, like at all, because Darrow is a former slave who basically transforms his entire existence to go on a quest for revenge against those who wronged him and his family. Whereas Hadrian is a noble who chooses to kind of escape that life and forge his own path, some to his benefit, some not, obviously, and some don't quite go as a plan. We know as these things do usually happen that way. So I don't feel like these two characters could be any different. Darrow's never seen a fight he didn't like, whereas Hadrian will be a little bit more of a diplomat and try to solve things his own way. Even if he does spoil the story for you in the first page, he tells you kind of how it is. Again, it's about that journey, right, not the destination. So I feel like very different characters in that regard, because Darrow can be quite the hothead, but the master tactician, whereas, I think that Hadrian is obviously a lot more thought-based, and I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to kind of plan these things out. And they're just very, very different, especially with the way that they begin. Now, another one to me is I think that Sun Eater kind of stays consistent in its tone. Throughout the series, you can really, while I think that like he gets better as a writer, don't get me wrong, what I mean is that the world that he sets up in Empire of Silence, I feel like, even through, I've only read through book 5 so far, I feel like it stays consistent with that same tone. You never once feel like, oh, this took like a big turn. You feel like it has been building and building and building. Now, is it getting better? Yes, absolutely it's getting better. But what I mean is it stays more consistent to what it was set up to be. Whereas Red Rising, not only does the first book, I feel like it grows with the audience. Like it can be approachable for audiences who had just finished Hunger Games and wanted to kind of move on to stuff that was getting a little darker. And each book gets more and more messed up. By the time you get to the sequel books, that's books 4 through 5 and 6, and eventually 7, you get more of the, it leans hard into the grimdark. So I think, well, there's bad things that happen in ℚ𝕤𝕤𝕣𝕠𝕜. It never really gets into grimdark, whereas Pierce gets full-on Joe Abercrombie, where he will tell you what the intestines look like as they're falling out. Meat carpet for people who know what I'm talking about. You know, if you know, you know, you know. I feel like if ℚ𝕤𝕤𝕤 is adult sci-fi, I say that Red Rising is very much grimdark sci-fi, because there are times in that where I question if Joe Abercrombie was ghostwriting that series for a bit. But again, there's room for both of those things, and that kind of leads me to the prose. Now, with the prose, I think that Christopher, he writes extremely layered, beautiful wordplay, very much in a Ray Bradbury kind of way. And that's the highest compliment I can give, because I think Ray Bradbury is one of the greatest writers ever. I get so many people who tell me, I wish Patrick Rothfuss would finish the Name of the Wind trilogy because he's the most beautiful writer I've ever read. And I'm like, well, I've got Christopher Ruocchio, who I think writes just as pretty as Rothfuss, and he actually writes. He puts out a tome every single year. Not to take shots, but hey, it comes up. Pierce, he can kind of be viewed as kind of pulpy, frantic, I guess you say, with some of the over-the-top crazy actions, because he's the type who will put you in the middle of a war scene from that first-person point of view, and you imagine stuff's going crazy, it's hectic everywhere, and that's the way that he writes. So some people can kind of look at that as schlocky. I don't. I think Pierce is a very talented author. I think at least by the time we got to Dark Age, at least once a chapter, I was looking up the thesaurus to see what the hell does that word mean, and how is he using it like that? Because he's very much an accomplished writer. So I want to say they just have very different writing styles, very, very different. So most people that are big prose snobs are going to look at Christopher's writing and say, "Oh my God, yes, he is a superior writer." I say they have very different writing styles, and that makes these series very, very distinct and very, very different. So to me, I definitely don't think that Pierce is a bad writer by any regard. I want anyone to assume that I'm saying that. Not at all. They're just very, very different in that regard. So which one is for you if you haven't taken a chance on one of these? I say if you're looking sort of some space adventure, space opera that gets a little darker over time, Red Rising is going to be for you. If you're looking for maybe that slow burn, philosophical science fiction in a framing narrative, ℚ𝕤𝕤𝕤 is going to be exactly what you have been looking for. Kind of put it more in layman's terms here. If you want Star Wars, but in the feel of a little bit of First Law, go with Red Rising. If you want Dune, but more in kind of that Robin Hobb writing style, the slow burn character study, ℚ𝕤𝕤𝕤 is going to be everything I think that you've been looking for. I guarantee if you've read Realm of the Eldlings, you're going to like. I'm sorry, if you liked Realm of the Eldlings, you're going to love ℚ𝕤𝕤𝕤. I don't think that there's going to be very many people there who don't like that style, because it is very much a slow burn kind of deal. Gene Wolfe's a comparison I get a lot. I got to bring that up. I haven't read Book of the New Sun, so I don't know. I know that Christopher was a huge fan of Gene Wolfe, so that's going to come up. Look, in the end, I think that both series are absolutely amazing, but they're very, very different. Can you like both of them? Yeah, I do. I love both series. I think they're both very good. But I made this because I can't talk about one without hearing about the other. I make a video about Red Rising. Someone always drops in the comments, be it on Instagram, be it the YouTube comments, Twitter, something. I always get ℚ𝕤𝕤𝕤 greater than Red Rising, or Red Rising is just kind of schlock. I like something that's got a little more depth to it. So I think the ℚ𝕤𝕤𝕤 is so much better. Okay, I didn't ask. I talk about ℚ𝕤𝕤𝕤, and someone will drop in my comments and be like, this series is so slow and boring. I don't know what you talk about so much. Red Rising is so much better. At least something actually happens. And I just want to say, stop. Stop this. I don't understand why you've pitted these two against each other, because they're both great series and they're both very, very different. To me, this is like comparing Star Wars with like Lonesome Dove. I don't even understand this. Why are you guys doing this? It makes no sense to me. Yeah, they both have outer space in it. Yeah, they're both a first-person narrative. I mean, they both have male protagonists. I don't really know why everyone has to compare these two series, and why do people feel like they have to tear something down to build what they love up. I don't get that. I've never understood that. Can you prefer one over the other? Yeah, we all do that. That's not a problem. But I'm never like, you know what? I really like Lord of the Rings, but Dune's my favorite book, so I've got to just shit all over Lord of the Rings. I don't get that. I don't understand that at all. I've never understood it. So I just want to stop, because I don't feel like these series are anything alike, even if Christopher Ruocchio and Pierce Brown probably are. they probably have a lot of like-minded interests. And it's still my goal one day to get both of them on the channel, to talk to each other, and I just sit there and listen like a maniac because I wouldn't have anything to, my IQ is not near what these two gentlemen are. So I would just listen and moderate that for fun. But I think it'd be fun to do that and just talk about Dune for 3 hours, confuse you guys like crazy. So that's kind of where it's at, guys. That video that we did with Biblio, I want to thank him again for inviting me on. Just got me thinking, why does everybody always have to put these two series against each other? Because they're both great. And are they maybe for different audiences? Yeah. Are there going to be some crossover there? Absolutely. So I don't think that you have to like one to like the other. You don't have to dislike one to like the other. So there's room for both of these on our shelves, guys. I hope you will pick up both of them and check them out. I've done several videos for both series. If you guys want to know, I've done why you should read for both of them. I've ranked them. I've done all kinds of things. I've spoken with both authors on the channel because they are two series that I adore. And I hope you guys will give them a try with an open mind instead of going into it with your arms crossed, comparing it to this other series that you already love. Because again, I think you will love both of them if you give them an honest try. So that's what I have, guys. You agree, disagree? It don't matter. Drop in the comments, guys. Let me know. Disagreements are always welcome here. If you think one series is great and the other one's not, that's okay too. I just don't get it. I just don't get it. So why don't you drop in the comments, guys, and let me know so I will understand. So hit me there, guys, and I will talk to you there.